Hi everyone, welcome to the Babbling Irons. Today we're going to be talking about West Ham's situation. The players seem to be not happy with the situation at West Ham and how we are playing under David Moyes. There's questions around whether he has lost the players and whether they are, as we put it, in revolt. If they are, Moyes is still remaining at this current point, and we'll utilize this video to kind of go through the rumors that are kind of coming around at the moment about the player situation around Moyes. So stay tuned, and we will cover that today in this video. Hi everyone. So as we're saying, there are rumors around that players are actively now starting to question David Moyes and his tactics, and to question the negative way in which we set up. Obviously, originally, before it was positioned that is only one or two players are unhappy. Mainly Ben Rama was one of the ones talked around. There's also been other players that weren't necessarily playing who were also potentially unhappy. We can surmise that was most likely the likes of Ben Johnson, who played a lot last season but has hardly featured this year, Pablo Fornals, and then obviously as it's gone forward, we've seen the likes of messages from Areola talking around, surrounding yourself with positive people. Lanzini making points around his pass completion rate. His wife also making comments about he should be playing in games. Again, Fornals talking about don't let people lose their smile. We can also go back to when Ben Johnson was in a podcast where I felt, in my opinion, was crafting his words very carefully around when describing Moyes and his interaction with players, and stating that certain players are interacted with more than others, essentially intimating that he was one of those players on the outside who rarely gets talked to by the manager. What we've also seen is how it's taken so long for players to be integrated. The likes of Emerson taking 7 months to be incorporated into the team. Skamaka in the last game being stripped, ready to come off, and then sat down for the remaining 6 minutes and looking very much kind of beside himself, and just looked a bit humiliated and defeated. What seems to be happening is that there seems to be a widening chasm between the manager and the players, and there's often been conversations in the past when we've had West Ham managers about them having essentially a manager in the playing staff. So Big Sam always talks about Kevin Nolan as that type of player. It was his bridge between the players and the management. It was that one who could essentially break that gap between the two, and would essentially manage the players in the sense of their morale, making sure they're supported, getting his arm around them, having conversations, bringing them all in, making them feel as part of a unit, as a collective. We also know that Declan Rice was incredible for that. Would manage the players in terms of getting them all out together for group meals. Again, we also know he's in the middle of all the kind of the hijinks that went on in the dressing room. Obviously, Stuart Pearce was another person who was a confidant for Moyes, also someone that players would go to as well. We've obviously lost two linchpins from last season in Stuart Pearce and in Noble. Now, Rice is an absolute quality player, but he's 24. He's still maturing as a young man, and potentially not maybe taking on the mantle of a captain as well as he should have, in terms of consistently talking to players, bringing them into the fold, making sure that they're happy. We always know with Mark Noble, for instance, he was always meeting with the players, new players that is, and obviously bringing them in, making sure that they felt comfortable, making sure they were welcomed. This doesn't seem something that's happened much this year. And there's such a disconnect in the team. You can see it on the pitch that players don't really seem to know each other, don't seem to necessarily even trust each other at times to do things. And this all comes down to those personal relationships off the pitch as well. If you don't have those personal relationships and those bonds of trust, and that kind of brother in arms approach that you kind of need in football, it's going to sometimes have an impact on the pitch, because the chemistry is not there. That level of trust is not there. If you don't know that the man beside you is going to run for a brick wall to help you if you make a mistake, and vice versa, players are not going to have that mentality to run for each other and to push for each other. we also look at David Moyes' comments after games. He was, for a long period, very critical of the likes of Ben Rama, talking about the likes of Cornet and Emerson needing time to adapt. Also talking about them needing to adapt to the league, bearing in mind that both Emerson and Cornet have either played in the Premier League or were playing in the Premier League at the time of us moving for them, or at least after we moved for them. You got the likes of Paqueta, who's taken 7 to 8 months before he realised that he's not a number 10, he's a number 8. Scamacca, he's talked about his ability, his technical ability, his link play being exactly what we need, and yet we fundamentally play a tactic that does not suit that. So we have a manager who doesn't seem to understand his players, or if he does, he doesn't care. And he's just trying to shoehorn them into systems that don't work. And his pragmatic approach this season has led to some very dour football, some really disconnected team play. And as a result, we're in a relegation battle and looking at players that really are not confident. Now, there are rumours that also the players are now starting to voice their discontent at Moyes and questioning the style of play and wanting to be more flexible, more open and more attacking because they feel that these are all rumours. These are not substantiated by an actual player coming out and saying it, but we can take tidbits from points that they are making that they feel that they are not being given the tools from the management and from the tactics in which to go out and actually be positive and to win games. And we are sitting in a kind of a perpetual circle and a perpetual kind of motion where Moyes is saying that we need to keep it tight, hold it tight for 70 minutes, and then I'll allow you to play. And because of that, we're constantly settled in a bad mind, in a negative mindset. We're set in that one of we don't make a mistake. We hold it tight. We do not come out. We do not express ourselves. We have to essentially hold everything very kind of really confined way, and then we can relax on the 70th minute. But by that time, in some cases, we're already 1-0 down. So all of a sudden, you're asking these players who are already in a negative space because of the predicament we're in to go out with a negative mindset in terms of our tactical approach. And then when they're allowed to open up and play, we're already potentially in a negative situation in the game. So it's just negativity, pardon negativity, pardon negativity. And then when we review Moyes' comments, he's very rarely complimentary of a player. And if he does compliment a player, it's then normally hit with a biting comment. It's very old school in that approach of, he did this well, but I need better here, here, and here. And whilst there are always reasons and ways in which to do that, it's the manner in which he does it, which seems to be causing a real disconnect in the team. And obviously he's mentioned around Scamacca not being at the physical metrics that he wants. Now, he hasn't then mentioned what those physical metrics are. He maybe have said that separately to Scamacca, but we do not know. The getting him ready to come on and then sitting him down, again, based on one through ball pass, it's showing that you had an idea and then you decided, actually, no, I'm not going to go with that. And you've kind of embarrassed this guy. You've only brought him on was going to bring him on for 6 minutes. You're asking him to improve and to get better, but you're not giving him the time to do so. Same with the likes of Fornals we've seen. Same with Lanzini. You're asking these players to go out and perform for you in limited minutes, and then you are bemoaning when we are not taking chances or we're not doing well because players are out of form. Now, his attitude to players, as I say, hasn't been a positive one to many. I've said it many a times. I think he's probably a decent manager, but he's a poor coach, and his man management leaves a lot to be desired, in my personal opinion. What we've seen is that we don't have many leaders in our dressing room as well, which is also confounded where we are. We do have players that are probably quieter. The likes of Cresswell, his star at West Ham, so to speak, is diminishing as well. He's playing less games. His form hasn't been as good. And again, it's when those players are not being able to essentially get into other players to go and support those players, it's going to have an impact. Now, what we've seen is at the moment, because we're playing so badly, the players come off unconfident. Paqueta in the last game, granted, he came back to his seat, went straight down the tunnel. Now, that could have been something completely innocent. But again, when you read into what Moyes was saying, he was incredibly frustrated. He had to come off. He had to explain why he did so. And he did it because of the yellow card, because he was on that yellow card. Now, Paqueta stormed down because he felt that he could still influence the game and wanted to stay on. Now, one, that's a very positive thing because he has the passion to want to play and want to be part of the team and continue. But to actively show that level of, defiance to the manager to storm off before coming back. Now, if he's innocent, again, we can't say for definite he went down there just because of his disappointment of coming off. It could have been something completely innocent, like he needed a bathroom break. But if he went down the tunnel initially because he was that frustrated with Moyes and that decision, again, it shows that there's a disconnect there. Players are not trusting their manager when he makes those decisions. They're not accepting that, okay, fair enough, I've come off, because potentially it shows a disrespect to the teammate who's come on, shows disrespect to your manager, shows disrespect to your overall kind of organisation. But I think in everything, there's such a disconnect between those players and David Moyes. We see in, say, the Brighton game, the players going out already with the mindset, we're not going to have the ball, we're not going to have possession. And when they're getting talked to then by the manager, they're actively shaking their head. There was also points made around Kevin Nolan having a bit of a fallout with David Moyes as well, based on people talking from what they saw from the crowd. So it seems like he's starting to isolate himself and become an island. He's also starting to isolate himself from the crowd and start consistently talking about the fans and stating that we don't give enough, we're not there. But whilst we may have been quiet because of the performances we're seeing and the negativity, I would say that the joy and maybe the enthusiasm to really scream and bellow and get behind has been sucked out of us because of that negative football. It is like an energy vacuum that it's actually been ignored by the fact that we're still turning up within our droves at home games. We're still going to every away game and selling out almost selling out our allocations. Obviously, Larnaca, we took 2,000 fans. Manchester United, I think we took 6,000 fans. So we are taking numbers. We are actively supporting. Yes, we're not maybe as boisterous as we have been, but we are supporting the team. So he is making himself an island. And what's even more concerning is the fact that there are rumours that the board have genuine concerns with David Moyes. They are not necessarily thinking that he is the man to take us forward, and yet they are still keeping him in charge. There's also a conversation that maybe if we get as high as 12th in the league because we managed to get on a bit of a run and pick up a few points and win the Europa Conference, that he will also still be allowed to stay at West Ham. But what that kind of then ignores is there are players who are not happy with the manager. The football is incredibly negative, which the players do not work within in many cases. Much of that has come about because we have failed to integrate players in this summer where we had such a high turnover. The following season is going to have just as large a turnover of players coming into West Ham. We're going to be potentially, if we were to win Europa Conference, in, again, 4 competitions. And we have a manager who doesn't necessarily rotate, relies on certain players, and has alienated players. We know at the end of last season, in the Bournemouth game, he actively called out the players and said a number of you won't be here next year unless you come back and prove you want to be here. And that was kind of supported by Soufal's, we'll see you next year, hopefully. Souček being offered a contract and then David Moyes apparently saying no to said contract. So he's not saying that he hasn't seen enough from or he hasn't performed enough in which to warrant a new contract or a better paid contract, and yet has been a mainstay in the team. It's constant negativity and constant just telling players they're not doing enough, not giving enough, not needs to be better. Whilst that is fully acceptable to have criticisms of a player and to tell them not doing that, the fact that his actions don't necessarily support some of that. In the case of, say, Souček, we've telling him he's not good enough for a new contract, and yet then playing him every single game. His words are completely at odds with his actions at times, and certain players have been frozen out. We've seen it in previous times with the likes of Sunderland, where certain players got frozen out of the team for no reason or other, failed to rotate. He sucked the energy out of the team, out of the club, out of the fans, and ultimately, obviously, they got relegated. We are, in many ways, following the same pattern. We arguably have much better players than what they did when they got relegated. But the truth is, the situation and how the environment draws many parallels. And, whilst David Moyes takes great pride in his old school approach, we're not in an old school world of football. Players are far more, for lack of a better word, they are far more sensitive than before. Words of encouragement will improve their performances more. And by all accounts, we have a nice group of players, a nice group of lads, but maybe not ones that are actually driven by essentially an acts of defiance to prove a manager wrong. They might be the ones, we have more players that need an arm around. Now, some people say they need to man up, but that is a pathetic kind of principle to have. We have to adopt a more personal level on these players if we are to get out of this problem. Now, if Moyes was to go, we will see a change in atmosphere within the construct of the squad. There's no two ways about it. It will happen. There will be a weight lifted because we have someone who is just on their own is quite dour sometimes. So it's not helping the players at all to move forward. Obviously, I've rambled on a bit here, but I think the main thing is we are in a period of time where we are struggling as a team for confidence. We are struggling tactically to assert ourselves on teams because we are, as Moyes would probably say, pragmatic, but ultimately negative. We have players who want to be more open, more expressive on the pitch, but they are being denied that. So players are not being trusted. They're not being listened to. They're being marginalised. They are being pushed to one side, and in some cases being publicly humiliated, either via press conferences or even by acts of asking him to strip down into their kit and then refusing to bring them on and having them sit on the sidelines. West Ham do need a change. The players are not happy. When the players are not happy, the team do not do well. The board have to acknowledge that Moyes is one of the reasons why we are where we are. Players have to take responsibility as well, but ultimately the buck always stops with the manager because he is the one who brings in these players. He is the one who implements the tactics. He is the one who's essentially in charge of that integration. If we are playing badly, if players are not integrated, if players are unhappy, that is all for the manager to resolve. And if he is not resolving it or not leaning on others in which to support him, he has failed. And ultimately, as a club, we are failing. We may fail upwards if we win Europa Conference, but that is it. We have failed upwards. We have got ourselves into a position which is arguably would be unwarranted in some respects, or for the manager, it would be unwarranted because he hasn't deserved that success based on those players. The players have done it for themselves rather than they've done it for the manager and for the club. Summer's going to be a big thing. We do have to probably ride out the rest of this season. He is likely to remain because they are so scared to make a change, purely because they don't see what's potentially out there as an option. Fear is driving the club and potentially driving us into not only a relegation battle for the rest of the season, but also a relegation. And should we go out of Europa Conference in the next round, Moyes' only real credit in the bank will have dissipated, and then we'll see really where the board's values are and where the board actually wants to go with West Ham. But guys, that's it. That's where we are. Thanks for watching. If you do like this video, as depressing as it is, please do hit the like button. Please do subscribe. Please do share as well. It's going to help us out. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers. We're getting there slowly but surely, but every little helps. But until then, guys, there's only one last thing to say, and that is, come on, you Irons.